Hello friends, we're here in 1 Corinthians chapter 5 today. 1 Corinthians chapter 5 is talking about sexual immorality and how we should deal with it within the church. So, it sounds a little extreme, but if you really read it, it all makes a lot of sense. So what Paul is saying, he's like, it's actually said that there's sexual immorality within your church. And not just any type, it's stuff that not even the pagans agree with. It would be like, in our churches today being like, our culture in America is like over sexualized. And if stuff is going on in the church that's even worse than what's going on in society, that's pretty bad. And I get the sense that I know from what I've read is that Corinth was over-sexualized probably in the same way that the United States is. So maybe even more so. But even the pagans wouldn't steal your dad's wife. And that's what was happening here. But it wasn't just that. It was the whole church. It's like the church was kind of like sexually immoral all over the place. And Paul is basically coming out and saying that the church is holy. We can't accept sin like this in the church because these are God's people, and when you have sexual immorality like that, you need to basically put the people out of the church. The church isn't like that. That's not the culture. Now, he kind of throws a disclaimer at the end. After he talks about all the reasons he mentions his last letter, and he said, in my last letter, I was telling you not to associate with people like this, but I'm talking about with the brothers. He's saying, I'm not saying that you should disassociate with everybody who's sexually immoral, because there would be nobody left. He's just saying that if there's people that are in the church and they acknowledge that they are part of the community, that they are part of the family of God, the brothers, as he says, you need to let them know that this is wrong. If they are continuing to say, look, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to live, worse than the pagans, you have to put them out. You have to put them out of the community. And the reason is not because, some might look at this and say, oh, that's extra harsh, but it's actually loving, because the reason that he's doing it is so that they will come back. He says, hand them over to Satan so that their soul may come back on the day of judgment. So that's why you're doing it. You're not doing it because it's like, oh, I'm sorry, we don't associate with immoral people. Oh, of course we do. We're all immoral people. But if you're saying that you're a Christian and you don't even care about the immorality that you're doing, and you're living this life that's this way, you have to cut them off and say, look, you need to know that what you're doing is wrong, and you need to know that there are consequences. And this is a short-term consequence, because eternity is forever. So you are going to be cut off from the church in the same way that someday you will be cut off from the Lord. So he mentions in the middle of this, I think it's more than just a personal thing. He mentions leaven. And leaven, we would today call it yeast. Yeast is what makes the bread rise. And they had a feast. And he mentions the feast here. The feast of unleavened bread. And back then, leaven, and I guess still today, leaven is a symbol of sin. And he's like, don't you know that a little leaven will leaven the whole bunch? And he's saying, if you let a little bit of sin go like this within your community, it will permeate your entire community. And you just can't have that. It's not good for the church. It's not good for your soul. It's not good for anybody. And God hates it. So that's what Paul is saying here. He's saying you need to purge these people so that they can come back. But he's also saying we need to strengthen the community and make sure that it's holy before God. I think my favorite part of this chapter is when he's talking about the leaven. He says at some point that, he mentions that you can present yourself as sinless, as blameless, like you truly are. And you might be thinking, well, what do you mean? You're just saying that sexual immorality is rampant within the church. How can you present yourself as sinless? And the answer is that it's through Jesus. We are sinless through Jesus. Not that we don't commit sins, but that they're not ours anymore. That they've been taken, that the sins have been taken away. Which is interesting because as he mentions, Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that is also a symbol of Jesus and how the consequences, how the death passes over us because we have put the blood on the doors and on the ceiling of the doorway. Because we have put the blood of Jesus on the doorway of our heart, he is passing over us as well. It's the same symbol and it's the same thing. And so he's bringing us back to the gospel. He's saying though sexual immorality is part of it, it's part of the church, you need to make sure that you are presenting yourself as sinless like you really are. So that is 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Have a great day. Bye.